Welcome to Plot Tales Daily, dramatic Reddit stories with crazy endings? Then you're in the right channel. I'm on a mission to hit 1,000 subscribers, and I'd love for you to be part of it. Hit subscribe and join. It's free. You won't want to miss what story is coming next. My neighbor who was a dad and married had S with me. I'm 18, living at home with my 2 cats. My mom is in and out because she travels for work. I handle most things on my own, and it's not like I have a huge social life or anything. That's why I started noticing him. My neighbor, mid-40s, tall, married, with 2 little kids. He was always outside mowing his lawn or cleaning the driveway. The first time I caught him looking at me, I thought I was imagining it. I had just walked out in shorts and a tank top to bring the trash bins back. I looked over and there he was, standing by his garage, staring. Not like a passing glance, but a full-on stare. I didn't say anything, but it happened again and again. Summer hit and things got weird. He started coming over to help with random things, unasked. One time my lawnmower wouldn't start and there he was. Want me to take a look? I didn't know if I should say yes, but I did. He spent an hour fixing it shirtless in the heat and I couldn't stop staring. I was hauling the grocery bags out of my car when he appeared. I didn't see him coming. One second I was yanking a bag that felt like it weighed 50 pounds and the next he was standing there, hands in his pockets watching. You need help with that? I almost said no because that's what I usually do when people offer help. But my arms were burning, so I just nodded. He grabbed 2 of the heavier bags like they were nothing and followed me to the door. I pushed it open with my hip, and he followed me into the kitchen, setting the bags down on the counter. I started unpacking them, trying to act normal, but he didn't leave. He leaned against the counter looking at the fridge like he was trying to figure out what to say. You do all this by yourself? He asked finally. Yeah, I guess, I said. It's not that much. My mom's not home a lot, so I just handle it. He picked up a pack of bottled water from the floor and set it on the counter. You're pretty independent for your age. I know a lot of 18-year-olds who wouldn't even know how to shop for themselves. I shrugged, not sure what to say. I was opening a bag of chips to put in the cabinet and I caught him glancing at me. Not my face either. His eyes lingered for a second too long before he looked away. I pretended not to notice and kept unpacking. He started talking about the weather, how it was supposed to rain later, and how the heat had been unbearable all week. It was small talk, nothing special, but I could feel something else under it, like he was testing the waters. When I finished putting the groceries away, I offered him some water. You sure? I asked when he hesitated. Yeah, sure, he said, pulling out a chair at the kitchen table. I grabbed 2 bottles and sat down across from him. He looked so casual, sitting there in his jeans and a faded t-shirt, like he wasn't almost twice my age or married with kids. You've lived here a long time, right? He asked, twisting the cap off his bottle. Since I was a kid, I said. Why? Just wondering, he said. You've probably seen my kids around, huh? Yeah, I've seen them, I said. They're cute. He smiled at that, but it didn't feel like the kind of smile you'd give someone talking about your kids. Yeah, they are. They keep my wife busy. I didn't say anything to that. I wasn't sure if he was making a point or just talking. We sat there for a few minutes in silence, and then he leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. You know, he said, it's nice talking to someone who's not screaming or asking me where the remote is. I can't remember the last time I just sat and talked like this. I laughed a little because I didn't know what else to do. I'm sure it's not that bad. You'd be surprised, he said, and then he looked at me, really looked at me. You've got a good head on your shoulders. You're not like most girls your age. I opened my mouth to say something, but nothing came out. He held my gaze for a second longer than he should have, and then he leaned back in his chair like nothing happened. I should probably get back, he said, standing up. Thanks for the water. Sure, I said, standing up too. He didn't leave right away. He stood there for a second like he was waiting for me to say something, then he reached out and touched my arm. Just a quick, light touch, but it sent a shiver through me. Take care of yourself, he said. And then he was gone, leaving me standing there in the middle of the kitchen with the empty water bottle still in my hand. It started with another knock on the door. I thought it was one of the delivery guys dropping off a package because it was getting late. But when I opened it, there he was, standing on the porch with that same look he always had when he came around. He wasn't holding tools or pretending to have a reason to be there this time. Hey, he said like it was the most natural thing in the world. Hey, I said back, not sure what else to say. Mind if I come in? I hesitated. He didn't wait for an answer. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. He looked around the living room like he was checking if anyone else was home. I just stood there, not moving. I couldn't stop thinking about you, he said, turning to face me. After the other day. I didn't know what he expected me to say to that. Okay, I mumbled. He stepped closer. You're not mad, are you? Mad about what? I asked, even though I knew what he meant. He smirked just a little. About me kissing you. I crossed my arms, not because I was mad, but because I didn't know what else to do. I'm not mad, I said quietly. He took another step, close enough that I could feel how warm he was. Good, he said, and then he reached out, brushing his fingers against my arm. I didn't pull away. He took that as a yes and leaned in, kissing me again. It wasn't a soft kiss this time. It was rougher, more urgent. His hands were on my waist, pulling me closer. "Let's sit down," he muttered, tugging me toward the couch. I sat first, and he followed, sitting so close our knees touched. He cupped my face with one hand, kissing me harder now like he'd been holding back before. His other hand moved to my thigh, squeezing gently at first and then sliding higher. I shifted under his touch, and that was all he needed. He pushed me back against the cushions, his body half on top of mine. His hand slipped under my shirt, fingertips grazing my skin as he worked his way up. "God, you're beautiful," he said under his breath, his hand moving lower now. He tugged at the waistband of my leggings, his fingers hooking around them. I helped him pull them off, tossing them onto the floor. He didn't even bother taking off his jeans completely. He just unzipped them, pulling himself free before climbing on top of me. It wasn't some drawn-out romantic thing. It was fast, messy, like he couldn't control himself anymore. I grabbed onto his shoulders, my nails digging into his skin as he moved against me. When it was over, he sat back, breathing hard. He didn't look at me right away. Instead, he grabbed the blanket draped over the back of the couch and handed it to me. "Here," he said. I sat up, covering myself as he stood, adjusting his jeans. "We shouldn't be doing this," he said, but there was no regret in his voice. "You're the one who came over," I pointed out. He looked at me then, a little smirk playing on his lips. "Yeah, and I'm glad I did." He started toward the door but paused before opening it. "Don't tell anyone, okay?" I nodded, and he left without another word. I sat there for a long time, the blanket still wrapped around me, trying to figure out what the hell just happened. I saw her again 2 days after he left my house that night. She was out in their front yard pulling weeds from her flower bed while their kids ran around with some cheap toy swords. I couldn't help but watch her for a minute through the blinds. She looked like every suburban mom I'd ever seen. Hair pulled back, wearing some old t-shirt and shorts. She didn't look like someone who'd suspect her husband was sneaking over to the neighbor's house. Later that day, I was in the backyard trying to clean up some fallen branches after the windstorm the night before. He was there again. I don't know how he always timed it, but it was like he had some radar that told him when I was alone. "Need a hand?" he called out over the fence. Before I could answer, he was already climbing over, landing with a thud in my yard. "You're gonna hurt yourself," he said, grabbing one of the bigger branches like it was no big deal. "I'm fine," I said, but he wasn't listening. He picked up another branch, tossing it onto the growing pile I'd started. "You always do everything by yourself, don't you?" he said, looking at me, brushing some dirt off my hands. "I don't really have a choice." "You shouldn't have to," he said, stepping closer. We were standing under the tree, branches scattered around us, and he reached out, tucking a loose strand of hair behind my ear. His hand lingered for just a second too long before he dropped it. "We shouldn't be out here," I said quickly, glancing toward the fence. "She's not home," he said, like that made it okay. "You sure?" I asked. He smirked, leaning in closer. "Would I be here if I wasn't?" Before I could say anything else, he grabbed my hand, pulling me toward the corner of the yard where the bushes were thick enough to hide us. It was fast, reckless, and I couldn't bring myself to stop him. When we were done, he stayed for a few more minutes, helping me finish cleaning up like nothing had happened. Then he climbed back over the fence, telling me he'd see me later like it was some kind of casual arrangement. The next day, his wife came over. She knocked on my door, holding a tray of cookies like she was trying to be friendly. "Hi," she said when I opened the door. I figured I'd finally introduce myself. "I'm the neighbor from next door." I froze, trying to act normal. "Oh, hi," I said, stepping aside to let her in. She set the tray on the counter and looked around. "This is a cute place," she said. "Do you live here by yourself?" "My mom's here sometimes," I said. She nodded, leaning against the counter. "I thought I'd stop by since my husband mentioned he helped you out with your yard the other day." "Oh, yeah," I said quickly. He helped me pick up some branches." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "He's always so helpful. Almost too helpful sometimes." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just stood there. She picked up one of the cookies from the tray, breaking it in half and eating a piece like we were just two neighbors chatting. "I hope he's not bothering you," she said after a while. "No, not at all," I said. She looked at me for a long time before nodding. "Good," she said, "because I know how he can be. He's got a bit of a wandering eye, you know?" I didn't say anything, but I could feel my stomach tighten. She gave me another one of those smiles before grabbing the tray and heading toward the door. "It was nice meeting you," she said, her voice light. "Maybe we'll see more of each other." She left without waiting for a response, and I locked the door behind her, my hands shaking. A couple of days after his wife came by, I was out watering the garden when I heard them fighting. Their house isn't that close, but they were loud enough for me to catch every word. She was yelling at him about something, her voice sharp and cutting. He wasn't as loud, but I could tell he was trying to calm her down. I tried not to listen, but it was impossible not to. She said something about lies and why you're always gone so much. I heard a door slam and everything went quiet. Later that night, I saw him sitting in his truck parked on the street. He wasn't doing anything, just sitting there with the windows rolled down. When I walked by to take out the trash, he called out to me. "Hey," he said, leaning out the window. "Got a second?" I hesitated but walked over. "What's up?" He looked around like he was checking to make sure no one was watching. You didn't say anything, did you? Say anything about what? I asked, even though I knew exactly what he meant. You know, he said, lowering his voice. About us. No, I said, I didn't tell anyone. He nodded, tapping his fingers on the steering wheel. She's been on my case lately. Thinks I'm hiding something. Maybe you should stop coming over here, I said. He smirked like the idea was ridiculous. You don't want me to stop though, do you? I didn't answer. He took that as a yes and leaned closer. I'll see you soon, he said before starting his truck and driving off. The next day, his wife showed up again. She wasn't holding cookies this time. She stood on my porch with her arms crossed, staring at me like she was trying to figure me out. I need to ask you something, she said. Okay, I said, stepping outside and closing the door behind me. She didn't waste any time. Have you been spending time with my husband? I froze, my mind racing. He's helped me with a few things around the house, I said carefully. That's not what I'm asking, she said, her voice sharp. Have you been involved with him? I didn't know what to say. Her eyes bore into me, waiting for an answer. No, I lied. Nothing like that. She didn't look convinced. If I find out you're lying, she said, stepping closer, there's going to be a problem. She turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, my heart pounding. That night, I heard them fighting again. This time, it was even louder. She was screaming about betrayal and breaking up this family. He was trying to calm her down, but she wasn't having it. I heard something crash like she threw something at him. The next morning, his truck was gone, and I didn't see him all day. Around noon, one of the neighbors came by to drop off some mail that got delivered to the wrong house. She mentioned how his wife had thrown him out. About time, she said, shaking her head. That guy's trouble. For the next few days, I didn't see him at all. His wife was still there, though, going about her business like nothing had happened. She avoided looking at me whenever I saw her outside. A week later, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, there he was again, looking worse than I'd ever seen him. Can I come in? He asked. I don't think that's a good idea, I said, stepping back. Please, he said, just for a minute. I let him in, closing the door quickly behind him. He stood in the middle of the living room looking around like he hadn't been there a dozen times before. She kicked me out, he said she knew everything. I didn't know what to say. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing back and forth. She's telling everyone I cheated, he said. You don't know how messy this is going to get. Maybe you should go, I said, crossing my arms. He stopped and looked at me. You're really going to throw me out too? I didn't ask you to come here, I said. He stared at me for a long moment before turning and walking out the door without another word. I haven't seen him since. His wife is still living there though, and every time I see her, I feel like she knows everything. Comment section, commenter 1, you're seriously fucking your neighbor? And he's married with kids? What the hell is wrong with you? OP's reply, it's not like I planned this, okay? He came on to me first. Commenter 2, his wife deserves to know. She deserves better than some 18-year-old sleeping with her husband. OP's reply, she already knows. She came to my house and basically blamed me. Commenter 3, you need to cut this off before it gets worse. He's using you. OP's reply, I know he is. I'm not stupid. But it's not that simple. Commenter 4, are you even thinking about his kids? They're the ones who'll get hurt the most. OP's reply, I don't know what to say to that. I never wanted to hurt anyone. Commenter 5, you need to move on with your life. This guy is a predator, plain and simple. OP's reply, maybe he is, but part of me doesn't care. After he walked out that last time, I thought that was it. I figured he'd stay gone and maybe things would blow over. I was wrong. The first sign that this wasn't over came when I went to the grocery store a few days later. I had just grabbed a basket and was heading toward the produce section when I saw his wife. She was standing by the bananas with her cart, talking to another woman. The second she saw me, she stopped mid-sentence and just stared. The woman she was talking to looked over at me too, then leaned in and whispered something. They both started laughing, not even trying to be quiet about it. I grabbed a bag of apples and left without finishing my shopping. I didn't want to deal with it. When I got home, there was a piece of paper taped to my door. At first, I thought it was just another flyer from someone trying to sell lawn care or pest control, but when I pulled it off, I saw it wasn't that. The note said, "We all know what you are, homewrecker." It wasn't signed, but I didn't have to guess who left it. The next morning, I was taking the trash out when my next-door neighbor on the other side, an older lady who's always been polite, called out to me. "You're not making friends around here, are you?" she said half-jokingly. I pretended I didn't hear her and went back inside. By the end of the week, the whispers and sideways glances had turned into full-on avoidance. People who used to wave when they walked by didn't anymore. A couple of kids riding bikes stopped in front of my house and pointed, giggling. I tried to ignore it, but it was impossible when even the guy at the gas station gave me a weird look when I paid for my snacks. I overheard him talking to another cashier after I walked away. "That's her," he said. Then, out of nowhere, he showed up again. It was late, maybe 9 or 10 at night, and I was sitting in the living room when I heard a knock. I knew it was him. "What do you want?" I asked, not letting him in. "I just need to talk," he said, glancing over his shoulder like he was afraid someone would see him. I opened the door wider, but I didn't invite him to sit down. He stood there, shifting from foot to foot. "She's making my life hell," he said, running a hand through his hair. "She's telling everyone I slept with you. She told my boss. Do you know what that's doing to me?" "I didn't tell her anything," I said. "That's on you." He glared at me. "You don't get it, do you? This is your fault too. If you just kept your mouth shut." "I didn't say a word," I snapped. He threw his hands up, pacing in a small circle. "It doesn't matter now. She's threatening to take the kids and move out of state. She's talking about a lawyer." "That's not my problem," I said. "You shouldn't have come here." He stopped pacing and turned to face me. "You think this doesn't affect you? People around talk. You think you're gonna just walk away from this?" "I already can't go anywhere without people staring at me," I said. "What else can they do?" He didn't answer. He just stood, breathing heavily before finally walking to the door. "You better hope she doesn't come after you," before slamming it behind him. After he left, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what he said. The next day, I found another note taped to my door. This one was worse than the last. It didn't just call me a homewrecker, it had a whole paragraph about how I was a disgusting excuse for a human being. The handwriting was different this time, which meant it wasn't just her. Other people were getting involved now. I don't know how long this is going to last, but it feels like it's never going to end. Thanks for watching. If you liked the story, hit subscribe. See you in the next one.